Hey everybody, how's it going? So last week I had many conversations with lots of my friends around the world. Some difficult conversations that pressed me from friends back in China who are really having a hard time, and other friends elsewhere. And one of them said, James, it feels like things are hanging on by a thread. And when he said that sentence, it reminded me of an old vision that God had given me about a friend, right? And I want to share that with you. So this goes out to everybody who may feel that there's something in their life that feels like there's no hope, or that it's hanging on by a thread, okay? So here's the vision. It was blizzard conditions, and there was a massive iced over lake, like thick ice, right? And in the middle of the lake, my friend was sitting there on a Chinese stool, dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, right? You would freeze to death, right? Anyway, he'd cut a hole out in the ice, and he had a fishing rod, and he was fishing through the hole in the ice, right? Then in the vision, it panned left, and there was this middle-aged lady, and she was wearing warm clothes, dressed for winter, right? But she was miserable, and she was like this, and she was shuffling along like that. And she came up to my friend, angry as anything, and said, "What are you doing?" My friend just looked up and said, "I'm fishing." And that was it. But this is what God spoke to me last week about the vision, what it means, right? He said, James, there's one place in that entire lake that has an opening, right? And your friend is sitting at it, right? And he said, this represents the promise. You need to choose to camp at the promises that I've given you. You have a choice to walk away from them, but there's no other opening to what I have for you than at the promise, the thing I've spoken over you, the thing I've promised you. Camp at the promise. The second thing he said was dress for the promise. Right? JP was not dressed for the circumstance, right? Or the surroundings. He was dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, which represented he was dressed for the promise. The lady who came over all angry, she was dressed in warm clothes. She was dressed for the circumstance. Now the circumstance might look like the opposite thing to what God has promised you. But God is saying today, dress for the promise, not the circumstance, right? And that thought in my head, things are hanging on by a thread. When my friend said that, instantly God reminded me of the fishing line that came down like this. Now, we all know, if we've been fishing, that fishing line has different breaking strains. So if you have 5-pound breaking strain, that means if you catch a fish under 5 pounds, the line won't snap, right? So there's all kind of different breaking strain, 5 pound, 10 pound, all the way up to 50 pounds, 60 and beyond, right? But it looks like this thin thing. And this is what God said to me about that. He said, James, in the kingdom, a little thread that you put down into the deep has an unlimited breaking strain, because it is faith in your hand that goes down through the promise and that goes into the deep. And that's the thing that will catch you, the thing I've promised you, right? So 3 things. Camp at the promise. Dress according to the promise, and don't think the thing that's hanging on by a thread is not strong enough to hold the weight of the thing that God has for you, right? The last part of the picture, there was loads of my friends gathering around him, pulling the rod, pulling this huge thing that he was catching, okay? So this is it, right? If you were to look at that line going down, it looks like nothing. But the promise of God can hold anything, right? It has an unlimited breaking strain. So I want to encourage everybody today, right? Are you camping by the promise that God has given you? Are you dressing your life according to that promise and not what the circumstance looks like? Because if you step towards the circumstance, taking hold of the promise, you will be dictating what the circumstance will be, all right? Don't let the circumstance dictate your promises from God, or say that they are not right, but let your promises from God dictate your circumstances in your life. So I hope that this encourages someone out there. You're not hanging on by a thread when God has spoken something in your life, okay? Take hold of it. All right, God bless.